I'd like to wish a warm welcome to the delegation of the State Party of Thailand, to the members of the committee. Sawadika, for the head of delegation of the State Party. Mr. Maitri Intusut, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security. We also extend a warm welcome to the Ambassador of the Permanent Mission of Thailand to Geneva, Mr. Tani Dong Pakdi. Before beginning, I'd like to wish the delegation and those following us online an expression of congratulations with regard to one of our members of the committee, Mr. Monte Yan Buntan, who is doing excellent work in the area of human rights for persons with disabilities. He is a great colleague and great friend. We now give the floor to the head of delegation, Mr. Intusut, for 15 minutes of opening remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon and bonjour. Madam Chairperson, distinguished member of the Committee of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Royal Thai Government, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation for the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the committee today. I am honored to read the Thai declaration to this very important presentation of Thailand's initial report on the implementation of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. Yesterday, members of my delegation have observed the meeting of the committee with other countries and civil society organizations with interest. For today and tomorrow, we hope to share some of our achievements and, more importantly, learn from the wisdom of the committee and seek guidance on how we can better address the remaining challenges in advancing the rights of persons with disability in Thailand. I'm pleased to see the presence here today of our friends and colleagues from the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, as well as civil society organizations, during the course of presentation of the national report and this presentation. We had useful meetings with both the National Human Rights Commissions and Organization for Persons with Disability, which help us identify the remaining gaps and challenges in the implementation of the Convention. The Thai delegation today comprises representatives from various government agencies, namely Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor. We also have in our delegation experts on international human rights law and representatives of persons with disabilities who work for the government as well as in academic institutions. Just early this month, Thailand hosted the third session of the working group on the Asian and Pacific Decade of Persons with Disability 2013-2022 to follow up the implementation of the Incheon strategy to make the rights real for persons with disability in the region. Madam Chair, as of February this year, the total number of persons with disability registered with the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability in Thailand is around 1.6 million, or about 2.4% of total population. Over 830,000 are male and 730,000 are female. 50% are with physical disability, 18% with hearing disability, 11% with the visual disability, 7% are with mental disability, and 7% with intellectual disability. Almost 50% are over 60 years old, reflecting the overall aging population in Thailand. Figures from the survey by National Statistics Office are a bit higher. The office has been collaborating with relevant agencies to achieve more precise figures so that they can be used to shape and evaluate target policy. In the meantime, relevant agencies in Thailand are working hard to reach out and encourage more persons with disabilities to register so that they are accorded appropriate support and assistance from the government, the private sector, and civil society. Madam Chair, Thailand became party of CRPD in 2008. The main law that allowed us to ratify the convention was the Empowerment of Persons with Disability Act 2007. This act replaced the old Rehabilitation for Persons with Disability Act 1991, reflecting a major transformation of the perspective of persons with disability in Thailand from charity-based to a right-based paradigm and inclusiveness. The Empowerment of the Person with Disability Act was later revised in 2013 to introduce new key policy and infrastructures such as community-based rehabilitations, disability service center, and anti-discrimination mechanisms. There has also been progress in many other areas. The National Committee on Rehabilitation was upgraded to become a National Committee on Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, chaired by Prime Minister and represented by 11 ministries, 7 national organizations for persons with disability, and 6 disabilities experts. Today, the committee serves as a main national mechanism that makes decisions, formulate policy, and put forward agenda related to persons with disability, ranging from issues such as support and grants, education and health care, anti-discrimination, to accessibility, employment, and independent living. Our initial report on the implementation of the CRPD was done with reference to the Constitution of the Kingdom of Thailand 2007. The present interim Constitution 2014 guarantees all human rights and dignity in line with the previous Constitution. A new Constitution has been drafted, taking input from all sectors of the society, including various groups for persons with disability. The revised draft has been circulated to the public just yesterday, so that a referendum will be held in early August this year. Thailand is fully committed to the obligations under the CRPD. In February last year, we withdrew the interpretative declaration to Article 18, following the enactment of the Civil Redress Act. We are also in the process of becoming a party of optional protocol. The National Committee has endorsed, after reviewing the findings of feasibility study, the proposal by the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security for Thailand to access to the optional protocol. Approval from the Cabinet is expected the 5th of April. The National Committee has also expressed its keen interest in becoming a party to the Marrakesh Treaty. Although this treaty is new and will require us to attain our domestic registration, we see it, in principle, as a very useful instrument that will help further facilitate access to information and knowledge for persons with visual disability in Thailand. Madam Chair, Thailand achieved several Millennium Development Goals targets, such as those on poverty eradication, education, gender equality, and health. Looking ahead towards a realization of the Sustainable Development Goals, we will continue to implement development policy in a way that helps narrowing gaps among people and empowering the vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. Persons with disability are included in our the 11th National Economic and Social Development Plan 2012 to 2016, and the 3rd National Human Rights Plan 2014 to 2018. Specifically, the 4th National Plan on Empowerment of Persons with Disability pronounced a vision for persons with disabilities in Thailand to live independently and happily in society with full equal enjoyment of their rights. Persons with disability are entitled to various forms of support in Thailand. Thai citizens with disability can register for disability identification cards, which enable them to apply for benefits such as disability monthly allowance, medical rehabilitation service, and accessible devices, free standard public transportation, free compulsory education with financial support for tertiary education, and interest-free loans. Registered persons with disability can also request for service such as house modification, personal assistance, and sign language interpreters. Their services are provided through the cooperation among and between government agencies, the private sector, and civil society, including organizations for persons with disability. Admittedly, challenges still remain. One of the main hurdles lies in the fact that most persons with disability in Thailand live in outer province and remote area. Almost 40% of registered persons with disabilities live in the northeast. 11% are in the south and only 4% live in Bangkok. This makes it difficult for the government to ensure that all have full access to service and assistance available. Nevertheless, the government has set up provincial subcommittees on empowerment of persons with disability, which are led by governors in 77 provinces of the country. The subcommittee draft their own plans and decide their own project for which they can seek funding from the government. But a lot of persons with disability tend to live far from the provincial center. It is therefore imperative for the government to continue to cooperate with the various partners and utilize the networks for organization for persons with disability. We need to expand the coverage of disability service center and strengthen community-based rehabilitation for persons with disability throughout the country. Information technology can also help us reach out the wider potential groups indeed. Thailand also faces significant challenge in achieving a truly inclusive education for persons with disability. This is due to insufficient early intervention, inadequate resource and personnel, shortage of excessive equipment and schools, and lack of highly flexible education system that tailor to specific needs of children with disability. This is why the majority, which is allowed 46% of the registered persons with disability, receive only elementary education, but as high as allowed 43% do not receive education at all. This poses even greater risk of unemployment when they are entered into the workforce. Government statistics reconfirm this. We found that as high as 46% of registered persons with disability in the working age today are unemployed. The government had worked hard to address this problem by, among other things, introducing the quota system in 2008. With this quota, private companies are required to employ one person with disability for every 100 persons hired. A similar system was recently introduced for the government sector. Today, companies that do not fulfill this requirement will need to pay a fee to the Empowerment of Persons with Disability Fund. This fund provides interest-free loans for persons with disability to start their businesses. This fund is also used to support organizations for persons with disability, capacity building activities, and research on accessible devices. The National Committee is now exploring different fund management models so that the fund can be used more effectively to help persons with disability find jobs and truly empower them. Multi-sectoral discrimination remains an issue in Thailand. We will continue to redouble our efforts to eliminate stereotypes and stigma against persons with disability, particularly those who are also discriminated because of their gender, ethnicity, and religions. We will raise awareness and promote understanding about the rights of persons with disability in family, at school, at work, and in communities. Efforts will also be made to improve data collection and interagency coordination. This will help us monitor the situation and evaluate the implementation of our policy so that we can improve upon our efforts. Madam Chairperson, looking at the cause of disability in Thailand, 31% result from disease and illness, and 14% from accident. These are all preventable. We need to do more on preventive measures. Early detection and treatment of newborn babies, knowledge of essential nutrition, and low safety campaign are some of the examples that can help reduce the risk of persons become disabled. Last week, Thailand deposited the instrument for the ratification to the ILO Convention on Occupational Safety and Health 187. This is one of the key endeavors made in this regard. In conclusion, we wish to reaffirm Thailand's full commitment to the CRPD. We look forward to our dialogue on ways to overcome the remaining challenges in Thailand. I am certain that the dialogue today and tomorrow will continue to an even more robust implementation of the CRPD in Thailand. Thank you and merci beaucoup.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the head of delegation, Mr. Intusut. And to continue on with this constructive and interactive dialogue, we now give the floor to the representative of the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. You have 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. On behalf of the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, I would like to thank the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for this unique opportunity for allowing the Commission to participate in the Committee's examination of Thailand's country report. The Commission has already submitted an alternative report on Thailand's implementation of the Convention and its capacity as the independent monitoring mechanism in accordance with Article 33, Paragraph 2 of the Convention. I will limit the scope of my statement to issues that we think are of critical importance to promote dignity and inclusion in society of persons with disabilities in Thailand. Thailand is among the first countries to become party to the Convention. Since the time of ratification, Thailand has made progress in some areas, the latest being the withdrawal of its interpretative declaration to Article 18 in February last year. And this is thanks to the active role played by persons with disabilities themselves. The Convention has helped raise awareness among certain groups of persons with disabilities about their rights. It is also a good rallying point for them to advocate for changes in both legislation and practices in ways that are more consistent with the Convention. But despite some success in some areas, many challenges remain in ensuring access to those rights by all persons with disabilities and a more effective implementation of the measures implemented by the government. One major area where persons with disabilities or their parents face much difficulty is education. Relevant laws state that persons with disabilities have the right to receive free education and to choose an educational system model, or institution that suit their special needs, interests, and ability. However, in practice, some persons with disabilities do not have many choices of school to go to, because schools are generally not well equipped to provide education to persons with disabilities. And in schools where children with disabilities are admitted, an individual educational plan usually does not respond to the specific needs of the student. On medical rehabilitation, the services provided by public hospitals are not adequate, while some provincial hospitals do not have enough expertise for rehabilitation. The rehabilitation services are mostly for mobility disabilities, but those for other types of disability are lacking, especially for mental disability. Persons with mental disability have to go to a general hospital for medical treatment and rehabilitation. However, personnel of many hospitals are not trained to rehabilitate persons with mental disability, and such service is not available at small hospitals. On employment, the measures to promote employment of persons with disabilities as provided for in the 2007 Act have not resulted in a marked increase in their employment rate. This is because not much has been done to prepare persons with disabilities for work. Difficulty in commuting to work is also an important obstacle. Many persons with disabilities are entrepreneurs or self-employed, and they need support in the knowledge on how to run a business and in access to credit. Madam Chairperson, on accessibility to transportation, this is another major challenge faced by persons with disabilities. Public buses are not accessible, and many persons with disabilities have to travel by taxi, which costs much more. Some persons with disabilities have to quit their job because they cannot afford the travel cost. The government should take serious steps to ensure that public transportation is accessible to persons with all types of disabilities. Another issue of concern to the National Human Rights Commission is persons of disabilities living in poor families. The monthly disability allowance and financial assistance given on a home visit is not sufficient to address the problem. A more comprehensive support program targeted at those families should be developed to enable them to take care of their members with disabilities. Such program would help the government maximizing its limited resources, as well as help prevent families from abandoning members with disabilities or placing them under institutional care. With regard to implementation of the convention, persons with disabilities want to be involved not only at activity level, but also in the development of policies and programs affecting them. This is especially the case with matters relating to education, employment promotion, and management of the fund for the empowerment of persons with disabilities. Implementing the convention involves many government agencies concerned. Therefore, there is a need for effective coordination and monitoring to keep track of progress and to identify obstacles that may arise in the implementation and ways to address them. We hope that the Department for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, in its capacity as the government's focal point for the convention, would undertake to carry out this role in a more rigorous manner. I would like to wrap up by saying that one of the main challenges in realizing the rights of persons with disabilities is the more effective implementation of relevant laws. In ensuring the enjoyment of rights by persons with disabilities, the government might need to allocate more budget to concerned agencies, such as in the area of education, medical rehabilitation, employment, accessibility, and adequate standard of living. But the government should see it as an investment in the human resources of the country. The more persons with disabilities can live inclusively in society, the more they will regain the sense of dignity, and in turn they can make beneficial contribution back to society they live in. I thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of the National Commission for Human Rights. So thank you to the National Commission for Human Rights of Thailand, and thank you for having adhered to the time allocated for the presentation. According to the order of this interactive dialogue, we now give the floor to the country rapporteur, the committee expert, Mr. Hyun Chik Kim. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my true honor to act as rapporteur on behalf of the distinguished members of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I'd like to express my sincere thanks to His Excellency, Mr. Maitri Insuiti, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, for your open address, which has given us a good understanding of a number of important changes that your government has initiated over the years in Thailand in implementing the convention. On behalf of the committee members, I sincerely welcome the Thai delegation led by the Permanent Secretary and also His Excellency Thong Song Baki, the Ambassador of Thailand, and other distinguished members of the delegation. The committee's warm welcome extends to the representatives of Thai DPOs and NHRI present in this room, and to those in Thailand following on the webcasting. I sincerely hope that this afternoon's constructive dialogue will be a productive and collaborative process. I'd like to think that we are all here as we share the transformative vision of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a vehicle for fostering national disability laws and policy changes in Thailand. As a Korean, I'm personally delighted to serve as rapporteur, as I believe Thailand and Korea enjoy a special relationship as we have been working together to implement Asia Decade of Persons with Disabilities over the years that included exchange of ideas and personnel at the level of government and also organizations of persons with disabilities. I used to be one of the steering committee members of the Incheon strategy to implement the Asian and Pacific Decade of Persons with Disabilities to make the right clear. I know the State Party is also one of the strong partner states in implementing the Incheon strategies. On behalf of the committee, I want to express my thanks for submitting your initial report with detailed information and subsequent replies to the list of issues to the committee. Also, the committee's thanks go to the Thai DPOs for submitting a well-documented alternative report. We duly acknowledge the efforts of the State Party has made to reform and align your legal instrument as well as developing policies and programs to implement the convention to date. Your state report contains, when compared with other Asian state parties, many positive aspects such as legal reform, policy and program developments, involvement of cross-cutting ministries in the process of implementing convention, and establishment of a department for empowerment of persons with disability. I think they are splendid examples. I will not be able to list them all here, but they will be duly acknowledged through concluding observations. I'd like to draw attention to some key issues in this dialogue. In the course of constructive dialogue, the committee members will put forward many questions to you, which the State Party delegation might find challenging. I am certain that the Thai delegation is familiar with those issues the committee had already spelled out through its list of issues, but I'd like to highlight some of them as rapporteur. To facilitate the constructive dialogue, I'd like to foreshadow some of the issues which may arise during the dialogue. It appears that the comprehensive legislative reforms are not backed by effective system of implementation and subsequent monitoring in a number of areas, such as inadequate measures to combating a widespread discrimination against persons with disabilities. I might need a legal advice on this, but it has been observed that the State Party's new draft constitution fails to include the right of persons with disabilities. As I understand it, it would be a case of backtracking from the existing constitution. The Empowerment of Persons with Disability Act of 2007 is the most critical in ensuring a harmonized implementation of allied measures, and I strongly feel that key legal reforms should have been supported by a national action plan. This seems absent at the moment. I heard the Permanent Secretary reading that you had forced national action plan. I could be wrong on that one. We can check on that, except in the area of employment. Accordingly, one can note the implementation gaps of the legal provisions cover reasonable accommodation, accessibility, covering a number of critical areas such as public buildings, parking, synergies, information, or the use of elevators in accessing Bangkok-based transport system. The list can be far and more extensive. However, some of the issues I have raised implies that policies, programs, and affirmative actions to ensure participation, inclusion, and equality of persons with disabilities with other member societies are not being fully implemented, including the effective implementation of Section 15 of the Persons with Empowerment of Persons with Disability Act framework that is supposed to deal with the unfair discrimination against persons with disabilities to meet the requirements of the Convention. It would be a fair observation to suggest that the overall implementation process has been characterized by a top-down approach, as shown by, first, the exclusion of women with disabilities in the National Committee for Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. Second, limited power being granted to the Subcommittee on Anti-Discrimination. Third, limited role being granted to DPOs in establishing and running local disability service centers. Four, and the issues concerning the transparent, accountable, and participation of persons with disabilities in the management of the National Fund for Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. On this point, I might add that the alternative sources invariably comment on the difficulty of persons with disabilities to access and manage the large sums of accumulated disability fund for use in the areas of rehabilitation, education, and employment, as well as to support organizations of persons with disabilities to promote their rights of persons with disabilities. Finally, in the context of Article 32, focal point, it is my expectation that some members of the committee raise some questions to the delegation about the composition of a national committee to ensure that 25 members truly and really truly represent interest and also expectation of the persons with disabilities. And I'd like to know what have been the key issues that it has dealt with to date. There is also other issues such as an over-reliance on medical model of disability rather than adopting human rights models with disability. This subsequently results in the failure to stress the importance of right-based approach in the development of services and inclusion, which is critical in removing social and legal barriers. To provide a few more observations on some critical issues, a state report on Article 12 does not provide any information on the child and adult guardianship, especially in the practice of supportive decision-making. It appears that the practice of supportive decision-making is widespread. The effect that a number of women with intellectual disabilities are subjected to first sterilization in their adolescence in Thailand, and there is no legal basis for this. It seems Many medical professionals advised parents of girls with intellectual disabilities to have their children sterilized as a standard practice, and many parents follow this advice. I can go on mentioning exploitation and cruelty of persons with disabilities, standard of living, and limited education opportunities, and also the measures available to reach unreachable people who live in remote rural areas and indigenous population. As you can see, there are a number of challenging issues we have to deal with in this dialogue. Accordingly, I might hasten to draw my report to a conclusion. I wish to state that the constructive dialogue will provide an opportunity to the state party to reform the strategies that have been adopted to support the pioneering spirit of the 2007 Act, and its related bylaws will result in effective implementation supported by robust political commitment and by a system of monitoring system. It is my wish that we can make this dialogue a truly constructive one. Thank you for listening.
Muchas gracias al...
Thank you very much, Mr. Hyung Sik Kim, the country rapporteur. Thank you very much for your very detailed statement and for also having stuck to your allotted speaking time. This now allows us to open up the floor for the first cluster of questions. So, members of the committee may now put concise and specific questions to the delegation. I give the floor to Mr. Mohammed Al-Taraneh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to welcome and thank the delegation of the State Party, the National Human Rights Institution, colleagues from civil society and DPOs, and last but not least, I would like to welcome our colleague Kim for thank our colleague Kim for a wonderful job done as a country rapporteur. My question is straightforward on accessibility. Fortunately, I have been to Thailand quite a few times, and I loved it as a country. I loved Bangkok and other sites, but the hospitality also there was super. As a person with physical disabilities, using a wheelchair, I have noticed quite a few challenges from an accessibility standpoint. I saw lack of accessibility in the city. I understand this. For example, the Bangkok is an old city with old structures. And my question here is, what measures is the state party is taking to work on removal of architectural barriers from the planned environment, and also on the other hand the social barriers that I have noticed. To look at a person with disability there it's like a bit of a sad look than a happy look, and that impacts the person very straightforward that something is not right in that particular thing. Increasing the level of awareness in disability inclusiveness issues is much needed, and I wonder what the state is doing in that particular regard. Public transportation, as mentioned probably from the National Human Rights Institution, what are you doing in public procurement system, especially those dealing with public transport, because a lot of people depend on that, not only locals but also internationals and visitors. Do you have a national accessibility plan, and if so, what is the level of implementation up to now since you're from the day of ratifying the CRPD, and if so, is there allocation of resources? And here I'm talking human resources, financial and technical resources to combat the issue of both of accessibility from both points, the physical and the social point of view. I thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Mr. Jonas Ruskus.
Madam Chair, my very warm welcome to the distinguished delegation of Thailand, also to the colleague from civil society and DPOs of Thailand. I have some questions regarding Article 1 and Article 2. Definition of disability in Thailand is stipulated in the Person with Disabilities Empowerment Act dated 2007. This definition defines disability as limitation of activity and restrictions of social participation due to the impairments of persons, but not due to the obstacle in social or natural environment. This approach, based on assessment by medical experts, but not on a person's needs, and is directly linked with the management of disability fund. Fund is disbursed in accordance with a framework plan or project, but not in accordance with the factual needs of persons with disabilities. There are some more issues regarding management of disability fund. One is that psychosocial disability is not explicitly covered by disability fund. The second is an insufficient involvement of persons with disability into management and monitoring of disability fund. Please indicate whether the legal definition of disability is planned to be accommodated with the Convention, and consequently to tailor state support schemas to individual needs of persons with disabilities, promoting their social participation, but also obtaining the participatory level of monitoring of use of disability fund. Another concern that I have is about reasonable accommodation for persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities in the whole public sector, but especially in juridical system. Police officers, judges don't have knowledge about persons with intellectual disabilities, and they are not able to ensure accessibility and communication for them. There are also great lack of quality sign language interpretation for deaf persons. Please inform the committee about the measures in the pipeline to implement reasonable accommodation in public sector, especially in juridical systems. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Ms. Teresia Degana.
My question relates to Article 6, disabled women. According to information available to the committee, women with disabilities and girls with disabilities are not included in gender policy and law in Thailand. And I would like to have some information if the government of Thailand plans to include women with disabilities and girls with disabilities in some of the relevant legislation, notably the Gender Equality Act and the Protection of Victims of Domestic Violence Act and the Human Trafficking Suppression and Prevention Act. And further, are there any plans to establish in cooperation with DPOs, disabled people's organizations, mechanisms that ensure that women with disabilities and girls with disabilities are not forgotten in gender and disability policy in Thailand? Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Damjan Tatic.
Gracias, señora Presidenta. Most warm welcome to the distinguished delegation of Thailand, representative of the National Human Rights Institution of Thailand, colleagues from civil society, especially organizations of persons with disabilities from Thailand. And I would like to thank both the government for their initial report and replies to list of issues, and especially to the National Human Rights Institution and civil society for their alternative reports, because as my colleagues always say, it is with the thanks of the other stakeholders from different countries, and CRPD is a global document. They are most valuable sources of information and a ticket for our journey across the world. I would like to express my appreciation to my dear colleague and friend, Professor Hyung-Sik Kim, country rapporteur, for a very nice job, nicely done, and also to echo what our chairperson has said. And I am sure that Thailand is very, very proud of your expert. Honorable Senator Montiam Buntan, our dear colleague and friend, is doing a superb job in this committee. And I will actually, in later part of the dialogue, when we come to Article 21, I will ask some of the questions he usually asks, but he's not here today. Actually, this session is very interesting because out of 7 countries that will be reviewed, 5 have their experts serving on the committee, so 5 of us during this session will be having a day off and to follow with interest how our countries are doing in the front of the committee. So without further ado, I have a couple of questions about Article 5 and a couple of questions about Article 9 of the Convention in this first cluster. Question number 1, you have in your official responses and initial report, you mentioned a wide range of different organs to whom persons with disabilities can, who were victims of discrimination based on disability, can lodge complaints. I think it would be very illustrative if you could share with us information on a number of complaints that were received by different organs, by the National Human Rights Institution, by the Subcommittee on Elimination of Unfair Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, various courts, civil courts, administrative courts, and also the outcome. If any of those cases have been resolved by different organs, what were the outcomes? I would like also to mention, because in paragraph 18 of your report, initial report, you talk about the organ which I have already mentioned, the Subcommittee on Elimination of Unfair Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities. I think it would be very interesting to hear how many people are engaged there, what are the human resources of that subcommittee, which has quite extensive tasks, and what is its annual budget, how much money is invested to enable it to help persons with disabilities protect themselves against discrimination. I have also a couple of questions on the Article 9, and sort of to follow up on my dear friend and colleague Muhammad Al-Tarwani's question on accessibility. I would like to ask you to give us committee more information on the monitoring mechanisms for implementation of provisions of accessibility, since you mentioned a number of pieces of legislation where there is where it says there has to be accessibility has to be provided. We would like to hear more about how it is being monitored, how it's made sure that in fact it is being implemented. The second question follow-up would be also, what are there any sanctions for those who violate accessibility? And 2 very concrete cases, sources we have received pointed out that there was with the BTS SkyTrain in capital city, 20 stations were not accessible. After the court case, the Supreme Administrative Court of your country ruled that those stations have to be made accessible and barriers have to be removed. But according to our information, that decision of the court hasn't been enforced yet. Do you have any update about it? And do you have any views on how that issue can be effectively resolved? The second, another aspect of accessibility, which is equally important, and here, of course, I do my tip of the hat to Senator Buntan. It is about the accessibility of information communication. We have received information about the project to improve the accessibility of websites for persons with visual impairment under W3C standard. That was hosted by Thailand Association of the Blind, and it was done in cooperation with your country's Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. And it seems that 44 of government's websites out of 64 that reviewed are not in compliance with W3C standards. So I would like to hear your views on that, and what are your plans to implement the provisions of Article 9 on accessibility of information and communication. And I'm looking forward to your responses. Thank you kindly.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Laszlo Lovashi. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, first of all, I'd like to welcome Your Excellencies, Secretary of this Ministry and Ambassador, distinguished delegation of the State Party and the representatives of the Thai DPOs here. Let me begin by praising the excellent job our fellow colleague Mr. Bunton has been doing, because we indeed are able to rely on his extended knowledge, research and professionalism. And I would also like to congratulate our country reporter for his impeccable job as usual. My first question will be related to articles covering 1 to 4 articles of the Convention. In relation to DPO's funding and their access to public budget in the State Party, I'm wondering what the principles and priorities, equality and proportionality included, are for funding DPOs in the State Party. In relation to the accessibility, please provide us with the relevant information about the procedure and conditions to apply for assistive technologies and devices tailored to the needs of people with disabilities, with special regard to the blind, the deaf and hard of hearing. Please also enlighten us on the practice of training sign language interpreters in the State Party and how the State Party ensures the quality of sign language interpreter skills. Even though Thai sign language is a language recognized by the State Party, I'd like to know what kind of support parents of deaf children could receive. In relation to access to information, I'm wondering what steps have been taken to improve the rate of captioning, subtitling in the media. My last question will relate to the access to transport. I was wondering whether you could explain to us about the procedures relevant to driving licenses with special regard to the case of the deaf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Ms. Sylvia Kwan. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to extend my greetings to the distinguished delegation of Thailand. Welcome to this interactive dialogue. I would also like to extend my greetings in particular to the representatives of DPOs visiting us from Thailand. I'd like to thank you for your contributions, and I would also like to extend my greetings to those who are following us over the internet. I too would like to offer my congratulations to our colleague from Thailand, Mr. Muntian Bunton. He is doing some excellent work and making a very valuable contribution to the committee. I am not going to repeat the questions raised by some of my colleagues and which I had also planned to ask, but I would like to follow up on my colleague Mr. Ruska's question concerning the definition of disability. I've got a question about certification and the disability card supplied to persons with disabilities. I feel that this is based on a medical assessment above all. The head of delegation provided us with some figures in his opening statement. I have to say that some of them concern me. We see that only a low percentage of persons with disabilities have managed to register in the State Party. Your figures fall well below the estimates of international organisations, which indicate that 15% of the population would have some form of disability. Nevertheless, I believe that you are making efforts to try and identify and certify the disabilities of persons living in remote areas, in the mountainous areas, members of indigenous communities, and all of those people who do not live in urban areas where services are concentrated, in particular the certifying entities or those services that supply the disability card. So what are you doing to ensure registration? When it comes to certification, I wonder about the effectiveness of the subcommittee to prevent unfair discrimination. Above all, what I would like to know is if anti-discrimination legislation also combats multiple and intersectional discrimination, because we have to remember that there are indigenous people with disabilities, women with disabilities, who are often victims of intersectional discrimination. With regard to Article 7 on children with disabilities, I'm also concerned at the fact that there is a very large number of people living in poverty, and this tends to entail a large proportion of children with disabilities being abandoned. This is a very worrying situation, so I would like to know what support the state provides to families who have children with disabilities and who are living in poverty. What do you do to prevent these children from being abandoned by their families? Lastly, I would also like to come back to what the head of delegation was saying about preventing disability. You have mentioned that this is a measure which is in line with the convention, but I would like to underscore the fact that Article 8 refers to awareness raising concerning the rights of persons with disabilities. If you mention preventing disability, then I'm afraid you are referring to something which falls outside the scope of the convention. I think that it really reflects a medical model. With this in mind, I would like to know what the State Party is doing to promote a respectful image of the rights of persons with disabilities in line with the Convention. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Stiglandveld.
Thank you very much. I hope that you will not be very angry towards the members of the committee, because it seems as if you are not going to have any sleep this night. But first of all, I would like you to be a little bit more, and you have to enlighten the committee on how you are defining persons with disabilities in accordance with the scope of the UN CRPD, because I think it is, we heard from Sylvia, it should be approximately 15%, but perhaps it is even more if you are calculating the numbers rightly in accordance with Article 1. Secondly, I would like to be very specific and ask you, when are you planning to double the support for DPOs, organizations of persons with disabilities? Because it is very important that you involve persons with disabilities in managing the challenges within Thailand. If I read correctly in Section 5 of the 207 Persons with Disabilities Empowerment Act, it does seem as if you permit discrimination based on academic culture and public interests. And that is definitely not in line with the Convention. And at the same time, it seems as if the Act does not recognize the denial of reasonable accommodation as a case of discrimination against persons with disabilities, and I would therefore like to know what kind of initiatives are planned to make sure that you will amend this law. And taking into consideration that you are actually in a current situation where you are amending or changing the Constitution, I would like to know in which way are you actually making sure that you are also strengthening the convention in line with the Constitution in line with the convention. And my last question is, how are you actually making sure that the children with disabilities, especially intellectual disabilities, are not wrongly victims of corporate punishment because of the disability and because of the lack of understanding of the disability by parents? I'm here talking about children with autism or that kind of disabilities, to make sure that they are not being victims of corporate punishment. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you. Ms. Ana Palacios, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Thailand. And also, I truly congratulate you for the magnificent expert that you have on this committee. A person at the service of those who are facing some of the worst possible challenges, and someone who carries out his duties with full professionalism. Congratulations and thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Kim for the excellent work that he has done as rapporteur. If you will allow me, I will refer to Articles 6 and 7 of this convention. And again here I would like to congratulate you, because Thailand is one of the very few countries in the world that has a specific, defined policy in relation to women with disabilities. You have your first strategic plan on the empowerment of women with disabilities. Congratulations for that. And congratulations also because Thailand is one of the few countries in the world where the movement of women with disability is starting to gain real visibility and really to take root. I agree with my colleague Teresia that it is excellent to hear that the fourth national plan for the empowerment of persons with disability does include this perspective, this gender perspective. But of course, I will reiterate here, we are looking into how women with disability are present in policies in general. You spoke about a reform of the Empowerment of Persons with Disability Act. And here, is there anything particular with regard to the participation of women with disabilities in the council of this national plan for the empowerment of persons with disability and the specific committees that are there? We've heard something about that, but I'm concerned that when you are looking at implementing this amendment and bringing it into force, beyond what we heard from my colleague Teresia, we're not only looking at how the gender policy is including this minority, but I wanted to know if there is any measure in place to ensure participation in policies for women in general. With regard to children, I'd like to reiterate the recommendations and comments made by the Committee on the Rights of the Child to the State Party in 2012. And although I will go back to this issue when we get onto the second cluster looking at Article 16, here, to add to the comment made by my colleague Sylvia, I would like to ask you, what policy is the State Party, Thailand, putting into place so that in general adoption policies for boys and girls in Thailand, there is consideration of the adoption of children with disabilities? And taking children with disabilities, boys and girls as a whole, I am asking in what way are boys, girls and women with disabilities assisted in terms of access to justice as victims, which we know they all too often are, victims of violence, in particular sexual abuse, so that they can then have protection and they do not, as we hear from some reports, have to be subjected to abandonment, to living in the street, because all too often such abuses, such violence is carried out in a family environment where, when the relevant authorities become aware of the situation, these persons are out in the street. So I'd like to know what the State Party is doing to address that issue. Thank you very much. Thank you, says the Chair. Colleagues, I know all of our questions are extremely important, but it is also important to stick to our time limits so that we can gain the appropriate responses from the delegation. I'd ask the remaining colleagues to shorten their questions. Ms. Diane Kingston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the distinguished delegation of Thailand. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank the National Human Rights Institution and civil society representatives for your contributions ahead of this constructive dialogue. Your voices are so important to our work and always most welcome. And thank you also to our most able country rapporteur, Mr. Hyung Chik Kim, for his opening remarks. My first question is on multiple and intersectional discrimination, which has already been mentioned, but I would like to know specifically what measures you're taking to combat intersectional discrimination in refugee camps on the Myanmar border for all persons with disabilities residing in those camps. My second question is on Article 8 on awareness raising, and is in relation to both disability and gender stereotyping. And I would like to know what measures you're taking to combat these types of stereotyping in all sectors, including, for example, stereotyping in school textbooks, in the judicial process, and in mass media. Thank you.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you. Mr. Delami Basharu, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the delegation from Thailand, and also thank you for the excellent expert you've sent to us, Mr. Buntian, my neighbor, and I feel very empty without him now. I start with a little concern. I think in your statement you said Thailand has a challenge because many persons with disabilities live in rural areas. I believe in many states, persons with disabilities, many more persons with disabilities live in rural areas. And definitely state parties should be making every effort to ensure that such persons get services. So I would just want to find out what concrete measures you're going to put in place to ensure that persons with disabilities in rural areas in Thailand do receive access services. And then just a quick one on Article 8, just to follow up on what my colleague Diane Kinston just said. I would like to know more about the perception of persons with disabilities by the Thai society and what the state party is actually doing to mainstream such persons into the society. And also want to know more about the portrayal of persons with disabilities in your media. And finally, how are blind and deaf persons involved in awareness raising, either by way of the provision of braille and audio materials for the blind and also sign language interpretation for the deaf? Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. The last speaker is Mr. Liang Yu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also warm welcome to the delegation. Because, the first foreign country I visited is Thailand. And also I've visited many times Thailand, so I love the country. And also I appreciate the excellent work done by Mr. Kim, the country rapporteur. And also he has already raised many sharp questions in his opening remarks, some of which are what I want to ask. So I just ask a soft question. And one of the principles of the convention is inclusive growth. And Internet is one of the tools for the international community to achieve the goal. So accessible Internet can not only facilitate people with disabilities to obtain information and knowledge, and also facilitate them to live independently, but also can facilitate the participation of people with disabilities in the economy, especially in e-commerce, increasing their employment through Internet. For instance, many people with disabilities have already opened up their own businesses through Internet. So my question is that could you please offer more detail related to the accessibility situation of the Internet in Thailand? And also, how does the state party advance the economic empowerment for persons with disabilities through Internet? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. That closes this first cluster of questions. We will give the delegation of the State Party 15 minutes to organise their responses. After 15 minutes, we will come back here to hear the replies. Thank you.